Situated, and we have another great video from our partners at View.
Hello, I'm Rao Mulpuri, and along with my colleagues, over the last 12 years, we've been building View to transform the day-to-day window. The smart window controls heat and glare, eliminates blinds and shades, and provides view and natural light all the time. Because we have a highly connected system, we're able to bring a whole host of smart building applications. For example, this video you're watching is coming to you through the View Smart Display, which is a high-definition display that's installed right into the window. Also on this platform, we have a sensor array that has a number of environmental sensors. And these can be used in order to control the environment precisely for the health and wellness of the people. These new applications transform buildings into living spaces that help us engage, interact, and communicate with each other. The buildings will be transformed into high-speed 5G cell towers with complete wireless coverage. Now that the blinds are lifted, these humanized spaces will keep us entertained while keeping us connected to natural light and views of the outdoors. And we're just getting started.
Thank you again to View. Thank you to our wonderful panel. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, James. So good morning, everyone. Excited to be here. This is my first RETCON, and I've heard some great things and very, very eager to see what James and the team has put together. I just love the format and the intimacy that this event has. I've heard that was true in Miami as well. A great panel this morning. I get to moderate, so it's really a great position. I don't have to actually talk about stuff. I have everyone else talk about their perspectives. But you know, we're in a moment in time. Jeannie did a great job, and Carrie and Jesse just teeing us up, and it'll be a further kind of conversation on a couple of these themes. But you know, in my mind, you know, there's a couple of things that are kind of converging on stage today. You know, we have obviously this unprecedented period of investment in innovation over the last 7-8 years in commercial real estate. I mean, some of us have been around for several cycles, and it's unprecedented, right? So, but free money's over, right? And we're in a period of rationalization. There's still going to be opportunities, but getting back to fundamentals is really, so what does that mean, right? Secondly, you know, the COVID and the change in how we live, where we live and how we live and work and buy, and all the changes that were not only accelerated, but maybe even changes that were triggered by COVID, and what does that mean for commercial real estate and its tech? And then lastly, the imperative of climate change and decarbonization. I mean, those are perspectives that converge here today, and we've got a great panel to talk about that stuff. So, I'm gonna I'll start. We've got some practitioners here. We've got office. We've got residential. We all have a component of retail. But Gijo, you're the pure technologist on the stage, and maybe I'll have you talk about just your perspective on where we're at in those dynamics.
Sounds great, Jim. Thank you. Oh, can you hear me okay? I'm Gijo Mathew. I am the Chief Product Officer at VTS. I do recognize that my name, if you add an E at the end of it, it spells G.I. Joe, so I'm okay with that as well. You know, I made that joke to my 8-year-old, and she didn't know who G.I. Joe was, and she didn't really get it. But it's been interesting. Like Jim, as you mentioned, there's been a lot of really interesting things happening in the world, and I love, Jeannie, your opening. It kind of laid a framework for all the things that I think we should be talking about during the next 2 days here. But I'm going to pick on a couple of them, and I'm going to start with one that we're seeing a lot of, which is the continued digitization of CRE. I don't know if any of you know this name, Ray Kurzweil. Like, he's a futurist. He used to work at Google Space Labs and stuff like that. But he has this law that he talks about, which is the law of accelerating returns. And that law is about like that technology creates more opportunity that accelerates the use and adoption of more technology. So it's interesting. We've seen that happen in many different industries, and I've come from, you know, MarTech, ad tech, IT security, like every kind of different industry, and we've seen the same pattern happen, right? Technology begets more technology and more rapid change in the world. His son is actually on the board of our company, and it's been fun to work with him and talk about how we are impacting change into the world of commercial real estate. So I think the digitization of commercial real estate is one of the biggest things, and we started to touch on a couple of these in the last two panels, but data is one of the big ones that helps drive that change, and he talks a lot about that, that change is driven by the digitization of the world and digitization of data. I think so one of the trends, and I think one of the big things we see and we're trying to help our clients with is how do we continue to digitize that data? And data points are really interesting. How do we get data points from things like sensors and data in our databases and so on? But what we really focus on with VTS and our customers is the data that's in the minds of people, right? Like it's in inherently, especially in CRE, much of the data that we need to help make better strategic decisions are in the minds of people. And we can put sensors up and we can triangulate data, but the real data comes from the people that work in the buildings, the tenants that are in the building, the thoughts and minds of what's happening. It's kind of like why Facebook's so powerful, right? It's like it's not just like we know how many people are making posts, it's we know what they're talking about. You know what's in their head, what's in their mind. And so with our technology, we not only focus on, with technology, we shouldn't just focus on collecting data, right? We should focus on how do you drive change in a way that allows people to bring data onto a digital platform. And that's really the key, right? That's the unlock that you have to do in the world around digitization. Platforms are good, technologies are good, and it sounds crazy for a person that works in a technology company to say technology is not the answer, but technology is not the answer. It's really about driving that change for people. That's more the bigger part and the harder part usually to drive adoption and engagement. So I think that's one of the trends that love to talk about.
Yeah, I love the concept of just kind of, again, user centricity, for lack of a better word. And again, how do you think about, the challenges posed to our platforms in this accelerated environment? And Robert, you've been an innovator your entire life and kind of thinking about this moment in time and where we're at, and how do you think about it? And
well, one trend or vein that I would like to talk about is that everything we're talking about in all of these conferences is about operational technology now, not IT in the conventional sense. So when you think about innovation in our space, for years it was all about running the applications that run the business, not running the buildings. And the explosion that you're talking about has been about making the buildings healthier, making them breathing and digitizing experiences. Part of that, as everyone has said, is driven by, first, it's the WeWork effect and saying these buildings just can't be glass structures with elevators anymore. And then, of course, COVID accelerates it, and now we're competing with working at home. So I think, as everyone has said, and as you've pointed out, that's created a lot of the acceleration of the technologies. So I know in our world, we're doing a massive renovation of the Penn District. And that renovation is all about making that district very much like a very large hotel so that you can get anything you want anywhere. And of course, you'll have to be able to get it from your phone. So, our challenge is when we talk about pilot fatigue and bringing on new technologies is we don't really have an option. We see a lot of companies that are smaller than we would normally do business with, but the answer is they have a solution, a point solution that we need, so we have to try it. But where I was going to go with this was so you've got the normal adoption challenges of how do you bring all this new stuff in and get it to work so that your building starts to operate as you want it to. The data side, I think the challenge is that we have all this new data coming from the OT side of the world, which is disparate data as it relates to the hierarchy. On the IT side of the world, we've always lived with a hierarchy. Buildings, floors, spaces, leases, tenants. And virtually everything in our taxonomy has to tie to that. I see one of the biggest challenges. We can get our hands on a lot of the data from the OT systems, but the difficulty that I see us all facing is getting that to merge with our core application data so you really can draw insights and understand where.
Jeannie provided a kind of a vision and then also the enablement of that information for the benefit of your occupants and guests to the building as well.
Yeah, we've been sharing certainly energy-related data with our tenants for years, which is good, and that's helped both in energy consumption, it helps in the ESG initiatives, but we do see the tenants also wanting access to the BMS systems and BMS data. And Jeannie, the hub that you're talking about is a really good idea. We do typically one-off integrations with large tenants, probably much like you do. But it's tenants want data.
Yeah, and so y'all think about there is in the market like a flight to quality. You think about how you differentiate yourself from Vornado, from BXP, from again you're in office, but also in residential. And so, how do you think about the tech enablement that you're differentiating and competing against us?
So there are three areas that we can compete. One is cost, the other one is product, and the third one is service. And cost, we don't want to compete on cost. We don't want to become a commodity because we are not commodity. And in terms of product, there's always a better building. So our buildings are beautiful, but next year there will be buildings that will be more sophisticated, more luxury, better buildings than us. So it leaves us with service, which is like a great area to compete, and what kind of services we can provide our customers, and if it's commercial or residential, what kind of services that they don't even know that they need, how we can make their experience totally frictionless, how we can provide them things that to increase their, if we are talking about commercial, productivity, engagement, and if we are talking about residential, to increase their well-being, and how we can combine the work and life together, because this is exactly what happens today. So we are focusing on service, and of course it is enabled with technology. It's not like the focus of that, but it's enabled with technology. We are building a new brand around hospitality. We brought an executive from Ritz-Carlton, and we are working to build a brand that technology supports it.
Yeah, it's like, it's like, again, I think there's a theme here on just like technology is not for technology's sake, but it's like building organizational capabilities, going back to Gijo, like, the pilot fatigue. You learn through pilots. You build capabilities. You build, in that journey of continual trial and error. And again, you have to have, I also think about it, you have to have capital. You have to have the ability to execute. You got to, there's a lot of things that differentiate, again, the best in class in the market. So I know there's a lot of residential in the audience. And, Art, you made that journey from being an office company to a residential. I know also like the VC flows have all flown in the last 2 years have proportionally been in residential and multifamily. And so, I mean, how do you navigate? And you have a very dynamic portfolio right now in Bell. So
yeah, we do. So we have about 70,000 units, about 240 properties, just to give you an idea of the scale. And our operations folks, one of the things, I've been at Bell for a year now, is just building up that partnership with them, because there's probably about 10 active pilots where we're kicking the tires on different solutions. And then there's existing solutions that we have in place where we can certainly see where the innovation is slowing down. And then the established players that are starting, that were really, I call it like they were in second place. Now they're starting to say, well, that was really working for some of these startups that were starting to nip at their heels. So there's certainly this trend of what are we going to settle on and try to simplify our business. We do have we have 50 owners, so we're fee managed, and we had some value-added funds that we have with, about a quarter of our portfolio. So some of our innovations come from the owners that we have, because they're saying we've seen this. Their property people might have seen it. They're pushing us to do these innovations, and we're a willing partner. It's it's sort of like having a helping hand, and it's I'm on the innovations team, which we meet weekly to go through all the active pilots that we have going on. And
how many active right now?
What's that?
How many you said? How many are active right now? You mentioned the number.
Oh, how many integrations?
Yeah. Oh, no, pilots.
We have about, there's 10 we're looking at. There's about 4 that are active right now, 4 or 5 that are active right now. And we've done, we've kicked the tires on a lot. And, the other interesting thing I want to add is, we have a very rigorous cybersecurity funnel that they go through in contracting. And, I know everybody in the multifamily knows this. There's a lot of privacy issues with resident data, but I feel like I've become a lawyer again. I was never a lawyer, but, yeah, but I feel like I'm a lawyer most days, because I'm like, no, you can't do that, So even before it gets to our lawyers, we know the hot button things that, that these startups aren't really thinking about. Like, do you have cyber insurance? I mean, it's a simple question, but some don't, and that's not a good thing. I mean, I think, our goal really, since I've come to Bell, is, my partnership with our operations team and figuring out how we can simplify our business because, with the number of integrations that we have, now we do have one ERP in the middle, but it's all those integrations around it, which makes that pretty complicated.
Yeah, but before we move on to data, just maybe comment on just, again, free money is over. So, again, some of us have lived through this period of I guess rationalization is a good word, M&A. Just any comments on what you see? We're already seeing it, but Robert,
Well, I've spoken to a few people in the last couple of weeks about this because obviously times are different. Yes, free money is over, so I think rationalization is the key word. You're not just going to give anybody money because it's going to, they think something's going to happen. I think the people who are probably in the most difficult, the early stage is probably, while it's a little tough to start, I think they're in better shape because they're not going to be looking for the Series C, D, E, and event for several years, and probably by that time the cycle turns. I think the people who are kind of mostly pregnant and are looking for later rounds or an exit, the question is what happens to them? Do they tighten their belts? Do they do they cut costs? Because the model has always been lose as much money as you can. Don't worry about losing money. Just grow revenue.
Growth. Yeah.
Grow revenue, and we'll get multiples. But all of a sudden, you've got a lot of companies that are on that trajectory that were doing that. And my assumption is that they're all going to have to really pump the brakes pretty hard.
Yeah, it'll be cash.
Yeah, and the M&A aspects of it as well, right? The opportunities in the market for M&A, right?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in this because I look at thousands of companies.
I didn't mean to bring this up with you.
Yeah, but it's a really good point, and I think it's one, as you guys go through your pilots and evaluations, it's a really good point. We've spent a lot of time thinking about this with inflation going up, and there's an inverse correlation of valuation of companies, like these startups and these prop tech startups. So as inflation goes up, there's an inverse correlation to value of companies. And what that means is that these companies that were getting valued in the public markets at ridiculous valuations, they've gone down. The other thing that's happening is that because of those valuations are going down, these companies now need to look at other metrics that allow them to show that they're a good company. So it's no longer about growth at all costs. Like if you're growing your revenue, it doesn't matter anymore. You need to start showing profitability as well. So many of these companies aren't at the scale. Even Series A, B, C companies aren't at the scale to drive profitability. What does that really mean, drive profitability? They have to cut cost, right? And if they have to cut cost, they're going to have to cut service to the things that they're providing some of you. So I would take that as a consideration, right? So there's companies like more established companies that have already gotten to certain revenue points where we're break even or profitable. You'll see them to continue to deliver on more innovation for you where other companies won't be able to do that. That's just the way I look at it. It's a good opportunity for VTS, honestly, because we get to see a bunch of really great companies, and who knows, more consolidation is possible because of that thing happening.
Yeah, and we've heard flat out that some of the companies we've implemented, not portfolio-wide, but they're stopping with initiatives. So that's definitely a sign of the pullback. They just don't have the resources. It's people and coding and innovation. That costs money. So there's definitely a pullback. We feel it.
I also think you're going to see, as Gijo, as you said, there's going to be an acceleration to consolidation. There will be much more M&A activity. And I guess you guys are looking at people you can pick off easily.
Yeah, wherever it makes sense for you guys, right? Wherever it's the best for our clients, what you need next. We spend, luckily I'm not a practitioner, but I get to spend a lot of time with all of you and learn from all of you about what is really necessary. And based on those things, we'll make the right choices to help you move your business along.
Yael, any comments?
So we have our own venture capital and acceleration program with 34 companies, and we see it very closely. Of course, to get into this program, it's not easy, so we do the vetting even before. But we take into account that some of these companies will not exist, or they need to change their focus. And this is exactly what they stop, some of them, especially the young ones, and they think about, should we continue that in this path, or should we change it? And consolidation is definitely something that they discuss between themselves. So very interesting times.
And some of these pivots are really interesting. I was talking to a tenant experience company, and they don't see a way to profitability by servicing just landlords, right? And just serving. And so they're going to pivot and change and do things differently because they have to. So that's a great point, y'all. You'll see them shift focus to drive better revenue at lower cost at all points. So It's a very, very good point.
So I do want to spend a little time on data. Just coming back, you teed it up, Gijo and Robert, you talked about it, but maybe Yael and Art just to chat about just your data strategy. I mean, you already talked about the demands. I mean, a building, have you built a data team? Have you thought about the capabilities organizationally that you need? I see this as this decade of data. I mean, it's flying by. We're in 2022, but it's like this decade enabled by capabilities and just the ability to stage it. So maybe you'll.
So we built a few years ago data and analytics team. We decided that this is a competitive advantage, and we want to have this capability in house. And again, there are so many areas of data. There is internal data that was lacking, and we decided, by the way, to implement a new system, a new ERP system, just to bring everything into one place instead of all these staggering sources of data and spreadsheets. So we just went live, and we streamline the internal data. We make much better decisions right now comparing to 2 years ago or even a year ago. So this is one aspect of that, and then there is how to run these huge buildings in a very efficient way, which is integrated to OT, and how to grab all this data and optimize the way we run building. And then there is everything that is related to customer acquisition and customer retention, and where to build the next building or to buy the next building. So customer acquisition and customer retention, this is like an area. This is where we want to collect data in order to improve our services or to provide services that don't exist right now. And this is very interesting because there are so many sources and where you start and what you do and how you manage it. So we are in the process of really understanding where we go.
No, it's. I know about 10 years ago. Robert will hate this, but stopped doing custom software development, and we pivoted to data. We have an enterprise data architect, we have a data team, we have BI developers. I mean, as coming back to your point, as a competitive advantage, and Art, you came into an organization. Was it seen as a competitive advantage? I mean, needing to build that capability out of the gate?
So when I came into Bell, there was about a year before I started, there was an edict that we were going to cut out as many paper reports as we could. So there was a monthly financial report, there was operational reports, there was marketing reports. So there was a move already afoot to move it all to Power BI and make it all dashboards throughout the whole company. And that's pretty far down the road, but we did it so fast that the architecture of it isn't as stable as it should be. So I have hired a data architect, and we're going to an enterprise data warehouse with multi-factor, in Azure. So it's going to be much more efficient. We spend a lot of time moving data around, sometimes in manual ways that needs to be more efficient. But we are very focused on data and KPIs and looking at we have a ton of internal data. We have, resident data, CRM data. There's just a ton of different information. Then we take all the outside pieces of information, employment, a whole bunch of different things to figure out where we want to buy assets and help us bring in more investors to some of our funds. So there's a real business advantage to doing some of these things that it helps our sales throughout the company.
Yeah, so. I just see it as there's just been a change in the industry, and that's been a maturation process. It's focused on data, right? So maybe just focusing a little bit on organizational capabilities. I mean, I the other thing is again, we can have data architects, and we can have IT related kind of skill sets, technology skill sets, but it's about the organization, being able to adapt and absorb this information that's a kind of a yin and yang and constant kind of back and forth. So again, I'll turn to Robert, just thinking about just how that journey has been for Vornado, and how do you, again, I think it's a constant journey is the way I think about it.
Yeah, actually, I think it's very different for all of us, depending on the culture of the company, and whether centralized, decentralized, build versus buy. There are a couple of factors there. It's just a point on the data side. We've had very clean and good control of our corporate data for years and years, right? And so most of that is in a nice silo and in the warehouses and enabled by Power BI and other tools. On the OT side, I've struggled a little bit back and forth between build versus buy. So we put up in Amazon a warehouse for energy, and we've got over 1 billion rows of energy data in there. But then when you want to take the JACE data, the elevator data, the security data, the chiller data, the answer is, should we really be building this? Or we should really be buying it. But with respect to your comment, for us, because we're kind of localized, almost all of our stuff is in New York City, here in New York. We've got a fairly strong in-house team on the operational technology side that really looks for new products, and then our journey or struggle / success has been partnering with the OT tech team to make sure that the stuff they're looking at, because they're on the front line saying these are the needs we have to address. This is a technology that we need to implement. And we tag along, we make sure that on the cyber side it's audited properly, that the data is right, the organizations are okay. And so I think for us, the journey and the talent question is, first, do you partner well with the OT folks who are going to deploy the technology, because they're deploying it in a network we control. And so there's where the linkage is. And then the second phase is, once you do that, are the end users, meaning the building engineers and the people at the properties, are they ready to actually utilize this on behalf of the tenants? And I see those as two phases of the challenges for, when you talk about talent and what the transition looks like.
Yeah, I've spent the most time I've ever done in my career with engineering in the last 2 years, prompted by COVID. And we have this big indoor air quality initiative that I'm chairing with our engineers. We just deployed 500 sensors in 40 buildings to really start a data journey around healthy buildings. And so, but it's we're at a stage. It's easy to implement, but now you got to digest and operationalize the data for impact, for insights, for actionable, So I'm sure you go through that, Gijo, with your customers and the maturity cycles, and just how do you think about even your engagement model with your existing customers?
Yeah, that's a great point. You guys can write this down, because I think this was very helpful for how I thought, because we say data a lot here, everybody says data a lot, and we talk at different levels about data. I'm going to give you just a framework that I use internally with my entire team that helps us really understand what level we'll talk about. There's data points. There are things that are in the world that are data points, right? Individual things that you get data points. So a lot of times we talk about data points, we need sensor data, that's a data point. We need ERP data, that's a data point, right? Usually data points go into metrics, right? Metrics are things that you use these data points for, and you actually get some sort of trending and metrics and analysis of some of that stuff. But the real thing that drives change is insight, right? Is the insight that you get. So when we think about this generally with our clients and everybody else, we're trying to think through those levels. We're trying to say, okay, how do we get to an insight, and what metrics are necessary, and then what data points are necessary? If you look at that framework, it's kind of a wisdom framework, it's called, right? If you look at that framework, it allows us to tackle issues at each one of those levels, starting at the data point level. And we do a lot of work to make sure the data points are very good, because if you have bad data points that are low quality, that are incomplete, that are that actually don't connect and correlate, you can't create good metrics, right? And then you can't get good insights that the rest of the business needs to make decisions. And so that's the framework we utilize, and we try to help at every layer. So for example, I'll just give you a really quick example. Every one of your ERP systems has tenant data points, right? There's lease names and things like that. If you cannot connect an Amazon in one lease to a Zappos in another lease to a Whole Foods in another lease, and know that's the same tenant, what kind of metrics can you really create about your exposure to Amazon? What kind of insight could you give your leasing teams and your operational teams about how they're going to manage that account, right? Those are things that you can't do unless you clean up the data at that level, then think of the right metrics, and then get the ahas, the insights out of all of that. So that's what we try to do, and we try to work with. You guys have all similar strategies, and we try to help you get that clean data, get those real metrics, and then help drive those insights.
So, the other obviously big, as we talked about, decarbonization, climate change, and the partnerships that are going to be required operationally with, also with tech. Just again, I'm very closely partnered with our head of sustainability on just everything we do. We actually bike ride together to keep ourselves in sync because neither of us have time to kind of do it during the normal day. So just maybe, how you're thinking about that journey and the technology, and you'll all have you maybe start on there.
So this is definitely an area that we invest.
Being in New York is
yes,
too. So
exactly. Invests a lot of thought and energy and effort, and it's not straightforward, of course. And there are several aspects. One is how to reduce the carbon emission, and then how to build carbon zero buildings. If this is like we started to build a book, if this is possible at all, like to build the carbon zero buildings. And then what we do internally and in our buildings with our customers to reduce, to be more environmental conscious and how to measure it and how to define all these KPIs. And, I was in a different conference and then someone asked a question if they have some leftover of swag and they send it to Africa, should they keep that in mind when they do the KPIs for ESG? And I said to myself, wow, these are very advanced and we are not there in terms of like going to the details. We define KPIs, but even go to the next level, we are working very hard on that.
Yeah, because it's just, again, and then you overlay healthy onto the equation. How are you achieving healthy buildings? And again, we have, as a multi-tenant office owner, we have a boundary at the door. We don't necessarily, Robert, you talked about data sharing, but we really don't have data sharing constructs with our customers that have been necessarily mature, and so just, again, how do you think about that dynamic of the customer in achieving some of these, again, energy, health, goals that are part of the fabric of delivering superior customer service? And
it's hard. You're right, because we stop at the door, and we've talked about this a lot over the years. And more and more of the tenants want either control the access control system and/or the BMS systems. But I want to, the different angle at this is, we've been spending a lot of time over the years. We have a sustainability group, as we all do, and we spend a lot of time LEED certifying our buildings and doing all the little incremental things we can do to make them operate better and cleaner. But in the end of the day, a lot of times, unless you're building new, and we're doing some of that, but most of our buildings are old, the bones of the building and the BMS systems that are there, until you can rip and replace.
We're talking about the analogy, Gijo, on the pre-call, like, software. Oh, we could just kind of change software. We can't do this with stock,
Until you rip and replace an entire BMS system, you're not going to be able to take advantage or make that building operate like it would if you built it from scratch. And I think that's one of the challenges from a capital perspective, is when do you make that decision to do rip and replace on a building? So, obviously, if you're doing a major overhaul, we're like in the Penn District for us, it's easy because we're spending a lot of money on the building, so there's a big rip and replace there. But many of the stable buildings, you've got returns, and you've got EBITDA, and you've got pressure from shareholders, so, you do what you can. But that's, I think, that's certainly a limiting factor.
And how do you think about in residential, with your customers and their units, Art?
Yeah, they're in their units a lot more. That's one of the things. So, but because they're working from home. But one of our big corporate goals is the customer experience, and it's really the internal customers and our residents. So it goes down to the maintenance techs, the community managers, the regional managers. So what tools can we give them to make them more efficient? So we're working on some mobile apps for maintenance and our regional managers, because they're running around the properties all day, and they've been a little bit ignored in the multifamily, or maybe it's been a little bit at Bell, but there are applications out there, but there's not something I think that meets the needs for what they do day to day. And you can implement a work order system, but that's just one piece of it. It's all the other things they need to do their job, videos to have, and we've done this in office where we had apps that you could go in and look at how to change filter out and, all the basic stuff. And we're starting to put more focus on, the frontline folks, and then internally, just making sure we're providing the best customer service to them to make sure they can do their job.
And how do you think about the sustainability, healthy conversation or, dynamic in a residential setting?
Some with our owners because they're, we're providing data to them. We're providing a lot of financial data, but there's a lot of energy data that we have that we're providing for their ESG initiatives, and we have our own internal initiative as well. So it's all about data. I mean, trying to get the information that you have, and also it's capital that you spend in order to save money on energy or water or whatever. So there's a lot of different things, and ESG is a journey. It takes a lot of.
I still think this decade we're just going to have this, figuring out the relationship with our customers is. Again, I just don't think we've had good models in the past. So
It's certainly changing incredibly rapidly.
And we do have some more sophisticated customers like a Google that, out of the gate, you're providing a lot of, they're demanding data they're not even using yet, right? But that's a dynamic, right? So we have a few more minutes, and I just maybe kind of pivoting to kind of thinking about the next 3 years and just maybe one or two technology themes that you want this audience to leave with, for our industry. Like, and Gijo, I'm using you as my barb here as the pure technologist, and I'll have you maybe talk about that. So.
Yeah, I think we talked about a bunch today. So I'm gonna touch on one I think that ties a couple of this together. As a provider of service to all of you, one of the things we do is to say, who are you serving? You're serving your end customers, right? You're serving your things. So I spend a lot of time with all of you, and I look around the room today and looking at badges, I think most of you are customers of VTS at some level. We spend time a lot with you, but we also spend a lot of time with the actual end user, right? The tenants at the end of the day. And we're hearing a lot of really interesting things from our tenants, as you guys are picking up on as well, because you spend a lot of time with tenants as well. The interesting thing that I picked up on that is not necessarily a technology trend, but will lead to big technology disruption is that there's a rift happening between employers and employees. And that rift is centered around productivity, right? Historically, employees were like, come to the office, come to here, like you're going to be more productive, AKA make me more revenue because you are here. I'm providing this space for you. I'm providing this area for you to be more productive. And the biggest companies, Google's and everybody, already know that, right? They've figured out, like bringing people together and all that kind of stuff helps drive
They feed them
revenue.
to keep them captive, right?
Right. They may not say it publicly, but they do, right? They know that is true to happen. Now, what's happening is that employees usually went along with that, right? They were like, yeah, I have to go to the office to be productive and do all that kind of stuff. But now there's this rift happening, right? The rift is, do I need to be productive? Do I need to go to the office every day? Can I work from my home? Now, I think what that poses itself as is a new type of thinking, right? We have to think about how we can make people productive at the end of the day, people utilizing everything that we have, right? If you're inside the home and do we have a space that people could work to, in their multifamily asset, do they have to go to the office? When did they go to the office? If you tie all of that experience together, right, being able to have a user-centric experience for a person, they want to have a group event at the office, great. They don't have space, can you use a pre-built floor for it? And being really innovative with the experience of every single user will be amazing across multifamily, office, retail, industrial. I think is one of the keys.
So it's again navigating as a landlord where you play versus the door, and you've got a corporate. That's I think it's not tension, but the opportunity. Where's the opportunity?
The opportunity, and I think it's a huge opportunity for everybody here at the end of the day because it is your chance to get to know your customer the best, right? At the end of the day, and if you do that, that's what drives your revenue. Your customer is what drives your revenue at the end of the day, and so if you know them better, you'll be able to do better for them, and then increase your profits and revenue.
Y'all, anything for? Yeah. It's okay.
So following what you said, we realize that we are not in the business of four walls. We are in the business of productivity and engagement because productivity maybe you can be very productive from home, but it's also engagement and how to build this engagement. And this is definitely on the commercial side. On the residential side, we are in the business of well-being. And again, everything is mixed, so we cannot even differentiate between residential and commercial right now. But what it means that we are in the business of productivity and engagement. So exactly what you said, how we can provide all these services, how we can, convince people that collaboration is important and bring them to the office and have like an amazing office for people to collaborate and no more like gray cubes and more like fun places to do this kind of collaboration and food service and gym and everything that you need in order to be productive and engaged, and how we can, so it's not only the HR job anymore, it's like the landlord job to focus on engagement and productivity. And this is exactly where we focus on the services that will allow us to increase the productivity and engagement, and of course on the residential side, which I shared with you that we focus now on residential, is like how to create these communities, and everyone says communities, but how really to build communities around, like, I don't know, a building that is focused on family. And it means that there is like activity, you can work, and then there is activity for your kids, and you can, everything is with technology. You can, on platforms, it's like you select the activity, and you know exactly where is your kid, and you can see your kid, and you can have tutoring and whatever, but this is like with platforms.
Great. We are the clock is gonna run out here, so
I'll give you three real quick.
What do you got?
Simplification, automation, and focus on people and data.
Focus on people, all right, Robert.
Well, I think it's we're building, we're changing and facilities to amenitize our buildings so that the tenants can attract their employees and have a more productive place.
Yeah, yeah.
And the challenge there that I see is the tenant experience app, which we're all playing with. And Jeannie said it this morning. We're going to compete with the employer's app, which is an interesting problem. But I see one of the challenges, so for us in the Penn District again, between a gym, a co-working facility, a conferencing facility, restaurants, a doctor's office, parking, all of the businesses there we're running, and our app has to be able to enable the tenant to do anything they can do and pay through POS systems that are not our POS systems. So I think the integration, the next 3 years of actually solidifying that digital experience.
Maturation, a marketplace for the integrations. Yeah, we could talk about that for 15 minutes. So thank you very much. I appreciate perfect conversation, great conversation. I knew it was going to fly, so thank you.
You guys can stay seated. Yeah, that's fine. Awesome. Well, thank you to our incredible panel. We really have been joined by some of the top